Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Melanie noticed pretty early on in life that people found it very easy to share about themselves with her. Not just the everyday mundane things, but the things that were making their life and business messy. Often after sharing, they would say things like, "Sorry, I don't know why I just told you that." Melanie says she just smiles and says, "It's okay." When she looks into the eyes of another human, all she sees is a unique soul finding their way in the world, no matter what is going on for them. Melanie has been living in Bali, Indonesia for the past 6 years and is a psychosomatic therapist, entrepreneur, and teacher of Chakra Philosophy for business and the modern world. It's her work to assist others understand their story and find their wings. Hello, Mel. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. So good to connect with you again after so many years, and a fellow psychosomatic therapist who works in your own independent way. I'm really excited for you to share with my audience what you do and a little bit of background as well.
I know I've never actually been interviewed by another psychosomatic therapist, so I'm pretty excited about our conversation today.
We can compare notes and just show everyone how amazing psychosomatics is and how it really encourages you to just be your own person, your own style as well.
Exactly.
So, where are you coming to us from?
So I'm based in Bali in Indonesia, and I've been here for 6 years now. I left corporate 7 years ago, and then about a year or so later, I popped on over to Bali, and to be here is it's such a special place to be. I mean, I know you've been here before, and but it has helped so much in terms of, I don't know, deepening my understanding of psychosomatics, deepening my understanding of feminine, masculine energy and all sorts of things. But predominantly, it's funny, like why I first came here is so different to what it's turned out to be, of course. When I first came here, it was just like, I just want to run an online business. I want to, get it all going. And then the journey of that has been really interesting how it's all played out. But, I love being here in Bali and I love what I do, and it's all perfect and divine, if you ask me.
Yeah, great. It does seem like the dream for a lot of people to live in Bali, and it's awesome that you can call it home now. It's beautiful there. Tell me a little bit about the journey to Bali and a bit of an overview about what you do with your life now.
Yeah. So there's this saying where they say that you don't pick Bali, Bali picks you, because Bali was never actually on my hit list of places to come to. I've traveled the world. I've lived in Sweden and England and spent lots of time in Europe, and, grew up in Canberra, Australia, and lived in Sydney and Brisbane. So I'm a bit of a nomadic kind of person, but I actually haven't lived anywhere for this long, for a very long time, since I was a kid, basically. And it wasn't on my hit list because I always knew about Kuta and, that kind of tourism side of things, and wasn't an interest of mine. And then I was actually doing a coaching program at the time, and the lady was based here, and she was sharing with me about the entrepreneurial community and what life was like here and how it was so different. Like, Bali wasn't Kuta. There was a whole lot of other aspects to it. And so I thought, hey, I'll give it a go. But I remember when I made the decision, you know, I had done my psychosomatics. I'd finished my teaching certificate, my certificate probably, I don't know, 18 months prior to coming here. And I was doing face reading at markets twice a week. I had started my own practice, and I was really at a point of, I'm not sure this is really what I want to do. It's like I loved the psychosomatics and I loved that work, but the way that I was doing it wasn't actually what it was that I wanted to do ultimately, because I found myself sitting in a therapist room. I had been a massage therapist prior to doing psychosomatics, so I was familiar with the body work that was needed to be done as well, but it just wasn't aligning with me. I wasn't finding any joy in it. In fact, I was kind of not wanting to go, if that makes sense. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of trapped in the smallest room that I've ever worked in, and not out kind of living the life that I wanted to live. And so I guess through this coaching program I was in, I was sort of inspired, and I thought, oh, there's a pathway to create this, because I think I was around 35 at that point. And when I was 30, I remember buying that book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek. And, you know, at that point I was working in government and the global financial crisis had happened, and I'd had to take a job, you know, pay cut and all sorts of things. It was like the most terrible time of my life. But ultimately it was great because I had the ability to create the working hours that I wanted to do. So I had one day off a week. And on that day, I would literally study that book and try and figure out what it was that I could teach to take my business online. And, you know, at that point I was in communications work and personal assistant and those sorts of things. So I was like, what on earth am I going to teach, you know, online? But it was funny because even then I was looking at personality types and how to communicate well. And, you know, I feel like everything kind of interlinks in this story of, you know, the bigger purpose of our lives. And so I decided to come to Bali ultimately to force myself to move what I did into the online space, because I felt like I just kept going back to what was familiar, because that's how I felt I could make money. It's like, if I'm going to do psychosomatics, I'll be the therapist and, you know, this sort of thing. Knowing that I could make money online, but I had to it's like, I'm one of these people who learn through experience. And so I kind of put myself into these positions of, right, you've got a choice. You either do it or you don't, and let's see how it happens. Yeah. So when I came over, I didn't even tell anybody I was coming. The only person I told was my mum, because I knew that she would support me, but I just didn't want anybody else, you know, giving me the hard questions and what are you going to do and how is that going to work and all of that. So even the rest of my family, I only told them 2 weeks before I left. And I had sold everything, came over. And it was really interesting on that first flight over, because about halfway there was this very clear voice in my head, and it's like, you're coming home. And I remember just thinking, I've never been here before. How could this possibly be home? Like, you know, to which effect that's always stayed with me. But we learn it in psychosomatics, like your home is your heart. The home is being comfortable in your body wherever you're at, you know. It doesn't matter what your circumstance. And I feel like that is what Bali has truly taught me, because even though I have learnt so much over the last 6 years of being here, ultimately, and this is actually something I only just sort of realised, you know, not long ago during this whole COVID period. It's like, it doesn't matter where I am. I mean, sure, it's beautiful here and I've got a great lifestyle and I can, you know, I really do have a freedom lifestyle here, but I didn't actually have to come to an island to learn how to love myself, how to be proud of myself, how to just go for the dreams that I want to do, you know.
Yeah.
Which it's good in some ways, because, yeah, of course, I love where I am right now and I have no plans to leave, but just having that recognition of, like, we can, if we look at ourselves hard enough, you know, ultimately it's just about loving ourselves and loving what we do.
Yeah. Do you think, because this is the longest period that you've been in one place and you moved interstate a lot around Australia, do you look back, is there any reflection on all of those moves and maybe searching for something? and then not finding it and trying to jump to
Oh,
the
for
place to
sure.
search again?
Sure. In fact, even early this morning, I was journaling a little bit about one of those trips. When I was 16, I went to Sweden on exchange for a year, and that was definitely a life-changing experience. And I remember my full intention behind that, not really knowing what intention was at 16, was that I was going to a place where nobody knew me and I could be whoever I wanted to be. So I think when I've moved, it's always been like, wipe the slate clean, let's try this again kind of thing, you know. And this last trip of coming here, like there's been definite hurdles that have kind of kept me here even to really do that work of just being comfortable with who you are in whatever circumstance. Who are you really? You know, those were the questions I wrote at 4:00 this morning. It was like, what do you really want? What's the life you want to create? Who do you want to surround yourself with? I think these are things that you don't just do it once, you know, as life moves on and as you have your own experiences and you're developing, it's like you have to keep revisiting this stuff to really create what you ultimately want.
Absolutely. I love the review it and refine it and reassess, because as we experience different events in our lives, our perspective and opinions change as well. So a lot of people will go to a retreat and they'll be in that space where they get to reflect on these things. They feel amazing, and then they don't revisit it ever again, or it might actually be a year down the track. And I often say to people, revisit it every 3 months, if not earlier, until you feel really good about it. And the more you repeat things, you know that you're on that right track. And some things will need to drop off, but you'll never know unless you spend that time reflecting on those important questions.
Exactly. And usually it comes up after, well, I find it comes up after there's been some turmoil in life, you know, where things haven't worked out, where you've had to let someone go, or, you know, all those sorts of things. And it's like, what happened there? Like, how did I get myself back into that situation again with that type of scenario? Like, you know, and I think that's when I say I live my life very much through experience. So, I mean, I could learn all the theory and you know, think of it intellectually as much as I can, but to actually do it is another thing, you know.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The action. I really admire that. And that's what I'm often telling people. It's like, you can read all the books and you can listen to all the content and it's great, but the thing is you've got to do it. Even going on a meditation retreat, yeah, it's amazing, but the key is to actually integrate it into your daily life as well. Yeah,
exactly.
So what actually drew you towards psychosomatic therapy?
Well, I was actually seeing a psychosomatic therapist before I studied it. There was a man named Ken who worked in Brisbane at the Lightworkers Cottage. And, you know, while I was in that government job trying to figure out what I was going to do, I was actually in I didn't realise until quite later on, even while I've been in Bali, I've gone, wow, I was in a really bad place at that time. I was suffering from depression and really high anxiety, even having panic attacks, but I didn't realize that was what it was at the time. And so I had a friend who told me about him, and that's how I ended up seeing him. And every time I would see him, something would shift in my world. Like, it wasn't like an overnight success or anything like that, but there was definitely things that would move and shift, and every time I'd see him for some body work. And then one day he just said, while I was, you know, having a session, he was like, oh, there's this course that I think you might be interested in. And so I went and did the 10-day course, and I would instantly, I was like, I'm here. I was like so hungry to learn it all. And I think it was also because up until that point, even though I was still working corporate, I had started studying naturopathy, which moved into massage therapy. Even when I was doing remedial massage, when I was with a body, I was like, there's more to the body than this. Like, I just knew there was a deeper understanding that we could have around it. So it sort of was like this natural progression that was happening outside of my normal work, of what I was normally working to get to that place. And so And it was the face reading part that really excited me. So more so than the body work and things. I remember after our first 10 days and we'd done all of that and we were sitting around in a circle and everyone was, the question was, what are you going to do now, like with this? And everyone was, I don't know what, I was like, wait, why aren't you just going to go and do it? Because I was like, I'm going to leave my job. I'm just going to tell the world about this. And like, this is what I'm doing. And they were like, really? And I'm like, yes. And then I remember there was a Mind, Body, Spirit festival, I don't know, a few weeks later, and I ended up face reading, like just dove straight in with Herman Muller, who's the founder of Psychosomatics. And like, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I just have to dive straight in. And then it was from that I started the market stalls and everything else that sort of came afterwards. And the market stalls were really, I knew I had to do that because I knew that face reading isn't something that everybody talks about. Some people may be intimidated by it. Some people think it's just a whole lot of fluff. Yeah. And I knew that if I turned up at the markets, I was going to get every type of person and their questions asking me about it. So I just saw that as my initiation, or what's the other word? I can't think of the other word. When you go in and you sort of just
being thrown in the deep end?
Yeah, basically. It was great because I met so many different types of people, so many opinions about what I was doing, and it just gave me the strength to sort of, palm off some stuff or create and find what a good answer was to some questions. So I felt comfortable in explaining about it. Yeah. That was a good choice. And I say that to everyone.
Yeah, that's really inspiring that you weren't waiting for things to be perfect and have all the answers before you put yourself in the public eye. You put yourself out there and you found out what people actually wanted, and you got the practice as well. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking when you start, but then you develop your own style and to not teach someone else's way.
Yeah.
So let's go a little bit into the face reading as well before we get into your story, because I treat the body. I do look at the face, but I don't get into face reading a whole heap. Gab's really good at the face reading. Mm-hmm. But from my understanding, all of the chakras are represented on the face in a particular way, and you can read someone's life and their personality through their face. So can you give us a little bit of an overview and how you approach it?
Yeah, sure. So, there are different ways that people can do face reading. And initially when I did it, it went, how do I describe it? It's like you can go really into the traumatic side of someone's life, or you can go into the zone of genius side of someone's life. And I choose to go more into the zone of genius side because this is just my personal opinion, like I've worked with people who are heavily in that trauma space. And for me, I find that it's too heavy for me to work with. It's not actually my zone of genius to help those people. Where I find that my zone of genius is to help and inspire people to be their best. And so when I moved to Bali and I went online, I was in communities of online entrepreneurs, instantly. And all of them were trying to find their way, trying to find their gift, trying to, how do I articulate this? How do I be that person I want to be? A lot of them being other healers and yoga teachers and that sort of thing. And so when I started working with these people more, I was like, they need their positive gifts, not all the things that's wrong with them, because, so often we get told you've got to look at your belief patterns and what's holding you back and your blocks and all these sorts of things. But we forget about sometimes just concentrating on the good stuff. And so with the face reading, every chakra energy is in the face. So each feature of your face relates to a different chakra energy. And I'm pointing to my face, but you can't see that right now.
Maybe you can talk through some of them.
Yeah, sure. So the chin is your base chakra energy. Your mouth is your sacral chakra energy. Your nose, your solar plexus. Your heart is your eyes, and your throat chakra are your eyebrows. And then the brow chakra is where your brow chakra is, and the crown chakra is at the top of your head. So, depending, and it's more from the throat chakra down. that we get a lot of the personality traits, the zone of genius, what's holding you back. And like, even I'm looking at you right now, like I can see you've got like this gorgeous large mouth. So that's your sacral chakra and how you like to communicate with other people. So it doesn't surprise me that you're doing something like a podcast to, you know, help teach other people, but also get them to learn about you and open yourself up to that community a little bit more. So let's look at the mouth for a little bit. So what I do with the mouth is I look at how big the mouth is, whether it's a big mouth or a small mouth. If it's big, that person is more open. You know, they'll generally not necessarily be extroverted, but if you see them and they smile at you, you sort of feel comfortable straight away, and it's like, oh, okay, connect with that person. If someone has a more smaller mouth, generally there's a little bit more trust that needs to be developed there. So they might not be so warm and wonderful to you straight up. And I think that's the beauty of face reading. Once you understand it, you can actually start relating to people a lot differently. And so that person may feel a little bit cold, but because you kind of can see that, it's like, actually, I just need to spend some one-on-one time with that person. You know?
Coming from that place of understanding.
Yeah. I mean, face reading has taught me compassion on a whole new level. Like, I've always thought of myself as a compassionate person, but to really just see what's going on can just help so much with understanding someone's behavior, basically. And it's funny because usually people will say, when they find out I read faces, they're like, oh my God, are you reading my face right now? And I'm like, no, I'm not reading your face. But if someone does a behavior or plays out in a certain way, I do kind of start looking and I'm like, yeah, well, that makes sense because I can see kind of what's going on. And that does allow you to still be more compassionate. It doesn't mean you become a doormat and let people walk over you or anything like that. But, you know, you can just hold a bit of that space for that person going, okay, I can see that there's some stuff going on there. But yeah, going back to the mouth, so the other thing I look at is the top lip is the creativity and sensuality and the bottom lip is the communication. So just seeing how full those lips are, how juicy they are, or if they're thin and they're just sort of holding that energy back. It doesn't mean that you don't have it, but it's like, how can I express that a lot more?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's a great summary. And then there's even the face splits as well, isn't there?
Yeah. And the face split for me, that really was the catalyst to changing my life when we did that in the training. And the face split is when you split the face in, or you get a photo. You don't actually split your actual face. You take a photo and you split it in half and you mirror the left-hand side of the face to create a whole feminine face, and you mirror the whole right-hand side of the face to make a whole masculine face. And then you compare them in terms of what does that relationship feel like, you know, like a proper masculine, feminine, or not proper, I shouldn't say that, just like a couple kind of relationship. And when I did my first one back in 2012, my feminine looked like my grandma and my masculine looked like a little boy. And so I was like, okay, I think I have a bit of work to do. But it made so much sense. And one thing I always struggled with, even before I did psychosomatics, and why I love it so much is because it does talk about the chakra system so much, is I always loved the chakra system, but I couldn't see it. And that really frustrated me because I was like, I want to feel into all of these energies, but I can't see it, I can't feel it. Whereas the face split to me was that instant, wow, there's the reflection of what's actually happening with energies, you know, and a way to see it when you're not of that gifted talent of, you know, seeing auras and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people aren't, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I remember when I was doing the training as well and just seeing my face, and also just how quickly it can change because you get a snapshot 10 days after you've done all this emotional work and start expressing yourself, and how your features can change. And I know there's lots of creatives out there who document like pre-war, post-war, and just seeing how the face changes. And this is the face reading as well.
Absolutely. Actually, it's quite interesting. I did a whole lot of face splits about 6 months ago, And I've just got in contact with them now, and particularly as, you know, we've got COVID and things happening. So there's a lot of, it's not like we've all been stepping out of our comfort zone in so many different ways. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shifted for them. And some of them are like, yeah, I'm really excited to see it. And others are like, oh my God, I don't want to know what's going on. But I do feel like it's a great way to just even see where you're at that point in time, you know, and just, there's no wrong. I always say this, there's no wrong or right around it. Like, I've never seen a perfect three phase face split image before. I mean, I've definitely seen it change, and so it's become more familiar with those, or they look more similar, but I don't know if you could ever actually get a completely symmetric, I don't know. Yeah. If you did, it's for a moment and then life happens and it's like,
So what do you think about people changing their facial features? This is something that I've spoken to with a cosmetic doctor, and I think breast implants is that common one. And my view of it is that sometimes do the emotional work, try and express yourself as much as possible, but sometimes changing the physical body, as long as you don't just like whack those boobs in, is a way of helping you express more of that emotion. And so if we look at the face, there's people getting their eyebrows done, nose jobs, and getting their lips done. So what do you have to say about that? And Botox?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. There's a great conversation, and it comes up in every workshop I run. There's always this great conversation about this. I think if you are informed before you make your choice, I think that's really important. I think it is something to be mindful of. But again, there's no right or wrong, you know, whatever your intention is. But I do feel like it does change the energy for sure. Like I had one woman in a workshop, and she was from New York, and she was Jewish as well. And Jewish women, she was saying, a lot of them have this big bump in their nose, right? And I've got it as well. And actually through psychosomatics, I've become to love my bump in my nose rather than being like, ew, I hate my nose. Because it shows leadership. It's more of that natural way of being in that leadership role. And it doesn't mean if you don't have a bump that you can't be a leader either. It's just like that's more prominent for you. And she was saying that a lot of the Jewish women would get these nose jobs to take that bump out, and so they would have this straight nose. And then when she found out that it was all about leadership, she was like, wow, all of these women, these strong women who, you know, have powerful, you know, personalities and things, and they're changing that part of their nose, what would that mean? And I was like, yeah, well, it doesn't mean that they couldn't be the leader that they've always been, because I feel like, especially if it's a bone, it's kind of that ancestral personality that's passed on. But it could mean that they would make different decisions in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
With the Botox, I do get concerned about that, because that's actually freezing your face, right? So particularly around your eyebrow area or around your lip area, I mean, that's how we express ourselves. So if it's frozen, it's kind of been held back, and you're not necessarily communicating what you're really feeling. It's more communicating what you want to hear, you know, that sort of thing. Because
it is quite different when you're speaking to someone face to face and seeing their facial expressions matched with their tone of voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can feel more encouraged, but we can also feel more upset from people when we see them.
Yeah, yeah.
And probably maybe a bit confused if someone has overdone the Botox.
Yeah, no, it's because it's like, what are you, is it true you're feeling like that? I'm not sure.
I'm getting quite carried away with this, but I think we should keep going into it. Because you've talked a little bit about chakras, we might as well go into that. And you teach people about chakras as well. So can you give us an overview of the chakra system and the emotions that are governed by each of the chakras?
Yeah. So there's a lot of emotions that are governed by the chakras. And so basically for me, for each chakra energy, you've got your emotional aspect, your physical aspect, your belief system, and an area of your life. So there's quite a lot that goes into one chakra energy. I don't think I'll go through all of it because it's quite a lot. Maybe we can just focus on one or something. Yeah.
Well,
so
what do you want to go through? I feel like a lot of people get stuck in the solar plexus.
Yeah.
Once they've worked through base and sacral.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually like these bottom three, so base chakra, sacral chakra and solar plexus, because they're our most earthly chakras, that's where we hold a lot of the trauma and belief patterns that we need to change. The biggest one is always usually the base chakra. I mean, even I still go back to the base chakra all the time, because that's where we keep our fear, anxiety, and overwhelm. And so I teach the chakra system specifically for business owners to recognize when they're really feeling those emotions and not pushing them down, to then understand what it is that they need to do next to make a better business decision. So with the base chakra, if we're making those decisions from fear, I mean, what happens when we do that? It all goes, like in my experience, it comes back to bite you on the bum tenfold. Like, I'll take that client because I need some money, even though I know they're not the right person. I'll quickly do a launch because I've got to make some, usually it's like I've got to make some money. And it's just like, no, if with the base chakra, when you're feeling nurtured, when you're feeling centered, when you're feeling energized and vital, and it's like you're this calm core in the middle of maybe a storm that's circulating around you, but you can make your decisions from that space, then you're doing the best for your business and planting the seeds in the right way. So in business, I always relate that to foundations as well. So it's the foundations of your business, foundations for yourself, and those foundational emotions that keep you feeling really supported within yourself.
Yeah.
The sacral chakra, I relate this, it's our joy, it's our taste we have for life. It's ecstasy, it's pleasure, abundance, well-being. In business, I relate this to branding, because basically, if we're not enjoying what we're doing, the energy behind what we're doing is going to be messed up, basically. It's like,
it's going to be fun.
And it's like what I was saying at the beginning, how I was in a therapy room doing the psychosomatics, knowing that psychosomatics was something that I loved, but I wasn't actually doing it in a way that lit me up. And so it felt like, I start questioning myself, should I be doing this? All of that sort of stuff. So it's really about making sure you're finding the joy in everything. Now, business is hard. It's not everything you're going to enjoy, but you can find a level of enjoyment when you're doing it in the right kind of way, if that makes sense. You will still get up at 4:00 and do whatever you need to do because it's going to give you an outcome.
Yeah, and you've got that longer term vision, hopefully, with your business.
Yeah. The opposite for the sacral chakra is frustration, resentment, and guilt. So these come up a lot as well. So frustration with having the wrong type of client, frustration with how you're delivering your business, resentment around those sorts of things as well, and even guilt over perhaps how much you're charging and those sorts of things. So it's really important to understand this. And even when you're doing the face reading, particularly say with someone who's got a smaller mouth, like for me, I'd be really mentoring them a lot around that stuff. Like, it's okay for you to be happy. It's okay for you to enjoy what you're doing. Yeah. And then say for someone who's got more of a larger mouth, even like yourself, it's like, what's your content you're creating? How do you like to express yourself? I think there's a lot of pressure these days in terms of we have to be everything. We have to do the podcast. We have to be on social media. We have to do the 500 things. And I'm always like, just start with what you love first. Because if you start feeling frustrated, resentful, all of that through making that content, it's just not going to have the longevity that it needs,
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because I started off doing just talking to myself on a video and sharing that with people, and I'm like, oh, this is really limited, and I love it when I get to interview people. And so I've started doing live masterclasses now where I get to interact with people and see their faces as well, because yeah, often with your psychosomatics, it's not just what does this mean? It's like, well, what's the background? I need more information.
Yeah, exactly. And so you found your way, and which is what we all need to be doing basically with that. Because some people, they prefer not to, you know, they just want to write or,
yeah, working to your strengths.
Absolutely.
And not comparing yourself to other people like, oh, she's got a really successful blog. I hate writing. I'm a terrible writer. I can speak though.
Yeah, exactly. Like use your gift.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So can you go into a little bit more of your backstory and maybe what's a challenge or challenges that you've been through in your life? What have they taught you?
Oh, sometimes I think I'm still I think we're all still learning it. I think the biggest challenge and the one that's come up most recently, or the one that I'm, I guess, resolving that has come up most recently is having a narcissistic father and not even actually recognizing that until only a couple of years ago, and then understanding that's why a whole lot of other stuff has happened in my life, including having a sex and love addiction in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And that was that addiction that led me to more self-inquiry, that led me to the naturopathy, the massage, to the psychosomatic. So again, it's like, you know, whatever we experience in life kind of takes us to where we need to be, I guess. But really understanding what it is to be on the other side of a narcissistic person's behavior and not recognizing it can be so damaging, I feel, in terms of making progress, whether that's progress in relationships, progress in your business, progress in all areas of life.
Before you go any further, can you describe to me, in your words, what a narcissist is to you? I often will question people, not to tell them that they're wrong, but first of all I say, are they actually narcissistic, or are you just throwing that word around, and have you looked within yourself? Because is it you that needs to do the work as well?
Yeah.
So I do feel like it gets used a lot. So what is your process that you've been through? What is a narcissist to you, and how have you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. So, and I love that you've said this, because I always was just like, when anyone talked about narcissist people, I was like, that's a bit full on. You know, I wasn't quick to label my dad in that way, put it that way. But when I look back at all of these things, basically my understanding of narcissist is that they lack empathy. They have no ability to be empathetic to anybody around them. They can also do behavior like love bombing, so they'll make you feel good but then sort of pull away or make you feel bad on the flip side of it. And in my particular experience, there's never any empathy or apology for behavior. It's always sort of pushed under the rug, and it's been my fault, not their fault. I'm not like, I wouldn't say even my own personal relationships have been that narcissistic. There's been other low self-worth that has been reflected back to me in my love relationships. But I do believe it was having a narcissist father that had been the cause for that. And I'm actually really grateful that I didn't attract worse than I had. And I think this is what was so tricky, because I do believe that my dad loves me, and I do believe that he's generally a nice person, but his mother was actually really horrible too. In fact, my auntie used to call her a narcissist, and I didn't understand what that was at the time. And now that I do, I can see how that's played out and where that's come from. So, and I think, and that's why I've never called him that, because he's my dad. Like, you know, he loves me, he's helped me if I needed help, those sorts of things. But there have been behaviours all through my life where it's been very heavy, and I've been I don't know, just really emotionally abused in some ways, you know.
What's your relationship with him now?
It's we're not communicating at the moment because I'm still healing from it.
Yeah.
With a narcissist, they won't change, and this has been my hardest learning over the past 18 months, and also my deepest understanding of the grief process as well, because when it all kind of came to a head, and it was funny how it worked out, because I was going to go visit him, something happened, and I happened to have a friend who was going to look after my dogs who was a therapist, and I didn't even really know that, and I was just telling her what is going on, and she's like, you do know that he's a narcissist? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she really explained it all, and then it was like all of the pennies started to drop, basically. And from that point, I went through a big grief process, because my dad basically blocked me for what had happened, and I had lost somebody who was still alive, and I didn't know how to actually process that.
Yeah.
And I do feel like it's be careful what you wish for, because prior to this, because I run business chakra meetups, and we go through each chakra every week and things. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I've really gone through a proper grief process before, because I've had loved ones pass away, but I'm always quite at ease with that. You know, I believe that they're still around in spirit and things. So I, have never really felt deep grief. And then, of course, this lesson came up on, what it feels like to have that deep grief and how to move through it. And I actually did get a grief therapist to help me through it, because it was so confusing to be in that situation and not know how to rectify it, particularly as well as I am a therapist. I know a lot about these things, and because I was learning about the narcissist, it was like I still have to be at peace that he won't change, and for me not to get triggered when something happens.
Yeah.
That's my biggest learning right now. And something just happened even last week. I reached out for the first time, and I was like, okay, I'm not ready for that just yet. It really is. I just will not change or see what the problem is, basically. And I have to learn how to be at peace with that, and that is the process that I'm in right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
The therapist getting therapy is really important, to actually reach out and have someone push you to places that you wouldn't naturally go.
Yeah. Well, I did it more because as well, I couldn't, in psychosomatics, it's all about connecting the dots. That's how I love connecting the dots. And it was just like, I just couldn't get it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get it. And I needed someone to help me through that, Yeah.
With the grief therapist, are they someone that you know, or have you gone to like a conventional grief therapist?
No, actually happened to be someone that was recommended to me, ironically as well, prior to this, through a friend. And he was in Boston, and he'd worked with a lot of people that had trauma from war and all sorts of things. He'd been doing grief therapy for about 30 years. So I knew he was like the best of the best. I was like, he's going to be able to help me, which I think is, with something like that, you don't want to just go to anybody as well. Like, I felt so lucky to have connected with this man, so in such a crazy kind of way prior to that. And I was like, maybe this is why we connected. I don't know, because it is such a delicate, it's really delicate grief, and especially, and even narcissism, especially with narcissistic parents. It's really, it's hard, Yeah.
I think it's very admirable that you have just separated yourself as well to do your own work. A lot of people are just conditioned that you have to get along with family, and they put themselves in these really frustrating situations that just burn inside of them every time they feel obligated to make that phone call or send that text message or be in the same space as their family member who just triggers them on such a deep traumatic level. So yeah, maybe you will come back together, but maybe you won't, and just being okay with that.
Yeah, I think we will. There's just a few more things, because the reason it came up was it was Father's Day a couple of weeks ago in Australia, and I was like, so I did text him a few days before, because I even said in it, I was like, I hate these days because it's like, you know, you do feel obligated to give them a call, and I hate it when it feels like everything's swept under the rug and life just goes on. It's like, no, like I still need more time to do my thing, you know. I feel like, for me personally, I feel like it will be all right, but it just needs a little bit more time on my side.
Yeah. And grief not just being death of people or loved ones, it's loss of things, loss of pets in your life, loss of body parts if you have to get rid of them, and loss of people who are alive but no longer in your life for various reasons.
It's a big emotion. Grief and shame actually sit under fear. So we talk about how fear is such a low vibrating emotion, but grief and shame are even lower. So to not open up the gate and explore it, you know, in a way that feels safe, and making sure that you've got the right people to support you through that, to hold on to that for such a long time can be really detrimental.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about, or maybe it's related, maybe it's not, I'm not too sure, but how it played out in your 20s?
Yeah, with the sex and love addiction.
Yeah.
So basically, how would that have started? I guess I was in a relationship when I was 19 to get engaged, and that finished when I was 21. And at the same time, my parents were breaking up. Like, there was a whole lot of things that, in terms of relationships, just sort of fell apart. And I remember thinking, if this is what marriage is all about, I don't want to have a bar of it. Like, I'm good, you know. And initially it was fine. Like, I was just having fun and, you know, going out and meeting different people as you do in your 20s and partying and all that sort of thing. But then my meeting of guys became, how do I say it? It was like the behavior just wasn't healthy. So I would, you know, go to a bar with friends or something. We'd all have some drinks. I'd usually leave the group. I'd sort of spot whoever it was that I wanted, go after them, have like a one-night stand or something, and then that was it. And it was always me who was in control because then I could control that situation. And it was like I wanted the love and attention from that person, but I would keep them at arm's length at the same time. So it was like a double bind, basically. It was like I really craved the love, but I would never actually let them in because I was too afraid they would hurt me. So I would just be, you know, hurt me emotionally. I would just sort of keep it very light, you know.
And was there satisfaction in you ending the relationship with them, or the one night stand?
Because I'm in control. I'm in control of what's going on. And then I also had an affair with a married man during that time as well. Again, there's that being with somebody that you can't actually have. That's what's sort of playing out from my perspective. And then, you know, they've got their perspective that they're playing theirs out from as well. And it carried on. And then, but as it carried on during the years, the level of man I was attracting was going lower and lower as well. So not only was I still doing that behavior, but it wasn't even the good-looking guy anymore. It was like
just the guy
at the end of the night, you know, kind of thing. And you're like, ugh. And I remember the last one, and I just thought, oh my God. I remember just running home and just going, there is something wrong. And, you know, I was about, it was 28, 29. And I knew there was something wrong, but I had never heard of sex and love addiction before in my life. Like and I was just like, I don't even know what to call this, but I couldn't stop it. It was like I didn't know what it was. And I remember calling my auntie and trying to tell her, but I couldn't even get the words out to describe what was kind of going on in my life, because it's all very promiscuous. Like, it's not, I'd usually have one friend that I would say, oh, you know, I met this guy on the weekend, but it was very hush-hush and, you know, I'd just be doing my own thing basically. And then that's how I got into naturopathy, and then that's how I got into that personal, you know, knowing that I was the common denominator. It wasn't the people around me. It was something that I was doing to myself that was playing all that out. And now that I know what was also going on with my dad, my relationship with my dad was very bad during those 20s as well. I can connect the two, because before I always used to think it was me, but then there are things, you know, with how you have been brought up that really do dictate the type of people that you bring into your world and the type of experiences that you have as well. As I said, I never believed for a second that my dad hasn't wanted to love me. Like I do believe that, but he was just incapable of doing that, and he didn't want to do the work to try and be able to do that either. So, so that's really been the catalyst. The other bit I want to add on that, so even though around 30 was when I started that healing process, I only actually started coming out about that story only 2 years ago, and I held so much deep shame around all of that. Like, I can joke with you now and, you know, talk about what that was like, but, you know, I consider myself to be quite an okay person, an intelligent woman, and, you know, sensible. I'm not crazy or anything like that, but I had this deep, dark secret that was really holding me back, and that was playing out not only in my own relationships but also in business, because I was holding on to that shame and low self-worth, that if I went out to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, it's never going to fly. Like, I really believe there's no separation between you and your business. So while holding on to all of this deep shame about something that I feel like has got nothing to do with my business, in actual fact, it is the thing that's been holding a lot of it back from actually coming out and just owning that space, you know? Yeah.
And so do you feel things have flourished since you have opened up and shared that story?
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so since, you know, the thing with Dad came up last year, and there's just been, you know, another experience that I've had recently, and it's like just cracking that egg open more and more for that light to come out. And I feel like, you know, for whatever reason, it's taken this long for me to do it, but I feel like that's why I teach it as well. Like, I never teach anything I haven't experienced. I never teach anything that it hasn't been real for me, you know?
Yes.
So I feel like part of my journey is to have all of these experiences, so I really can teach from the heart, not just from a textbook kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah. I remember thinking when I was younger, or maybe when I was studying, probably when I was studying osteopathy, I was like, oh, I wish I could just experience every single condition, disease state, injury under the sun for just 24 hours, or maybe a couple hours would be enough, just so that I could really empathize with people. But then I have realized I don't need to do that. There's definitely things that are out of my realm, but I know that and I refer on. I'll tell the person. I won't try and practice on them. But we do get sent certain clients who will make us acknowledge that we've got our own blocks that we need to work on. So usually I find I repeat myself and I'm like, oh my God, why have I just said this to the last 5 people? What am I not doing in my life? So that ability to just look within and recognize your clients or your mentors, like you were running that chakra workshop and then realizing there was some grief there.
Or the wasn't it the grief was there, it hadn't happened yet, but it was like I haven't experienced that emotion fully just yet. And now so
I have. You can teach it.
Exactly.
What's the next one that you need?
No, I think that's it. There's grief and shame. That's it. I'm done.
Do you want to touch on fear a little bit?
Yeah, fear. I actually love playing with fear these days. When I first arrived to Bali, I would actually have out-of-body experiences because I was holding on to that much fear. Like, I turned up here with $3,000 in my pocket, having no idea how I would make it work. Somehow I've made it work. But I specifically remember like waking up in the middle of the night and just be like, whoa, I don't know what's going on kind of thing. And over the years, I've really shifted that relationship with fear. Like I know when I have a fear of like an actual fear, or whether the fear is more of a fear and excitement kind of fear. And even when the more like danger fear kind of comes in, I've got a better relationship with that now. It's not as deep and not as strong as what it used to be. And I play with it in different ways. So, for example, going to yoga and, you'd be going into a pose or something and I'll be like, why am I so scared to try and do this properly? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I kind of do this inner dialogue with my body, doing certain things to see if it's really true,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've been playing with fear these days, probably the last couple of years. But I mean, to be honest, for the first probably 4 years being in Bali, it was quite full on, and fear was a massive part of that, fear of not being able to financially support myself and all of these sorts of things. They're very real and they're very debilitating. Yet I say they're very real, but it's really up to us how we perceive that fear at the same time, Psychosomatically, it's very interesting because I've done so much work with trying to work it out for myself, what the language of fear is in my body. One morning I was just taking my dogs for a walk and there was actually a really large fire in a warehouse at the end of my driveway, like big. And I was like, I don't even know the number to call the fire brigade. Like it's not Western, because I was like, I don't know. And I rang my landlord and everyone was coming out and, kind of going a bit crazy. And literally I could feel it all happening in my body. I couldn't, my hand was shaking. I couldn't get my key in the door because I wanted to put the dogs back in my villa. My lower back instantly started hurting, and that's a giveaway for me for fear any day of the week. And it was so funny how that came on, and I was like, whoa, watch that just sort of come in straight away. And then on the flip side of watching it all sort of brew up, then watching what I had to do to actually calm it all down again. So I didn't go straight to work after all of that happened. I made sure that I spent a couple of hours just getting back to myself. And,
good.
Again, like so many of us live in this anxiety, overwhelm, fear space instead of just really calming down and taking one thing step at a time, like not overloading ourselves so we don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Instead, let's just be present and simplify life basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe we're on the same page with psychosomatics, is that you can have these facial appearances, these physical manifestations of issues, and awareness of emotions is one thing, but then it really comes down to living the life that you want to and living in line with your purpose. And so your story is quite inspiring, because I think a lot of therapists doing what you're doing do wonder, how can I do that, and how can I survive, and how can I put myself out there? So what would your advice to others in a similar position as you, or wanting to do something like you, be? Or business owners? Let's go business owners, because you were.
Good question. I don't know if I would tell people to do what I did. I think
what have you learned?
When I look back, I wish I had saved more money before I left corporate. My relationship with money is pretty terrible, as was my personal relation. It's all interlinked. But the one thing I've always had is courage, and I've always believed there's always a way. That's definitely one belief that I know I've had since I was little. It's like there's always a way to figure something out,
Yeah.
So know what your strengths are, I think. But, it's interesting now, like if there's a business that you want to go online and you want to do things like the way, I mean, even now you've got to be you've got to be agile and you've got to be flexible and you've got to know yourself really well. I was taught through Facebook groups actually, how to build my business, and that's how it actually got started. I don't go near Facebook groups anymore, so I don't actually know if I was starting out right now. I don't know what that would be like, because it's so different now to what it was 6 years ago when that was the newest thing and the way to get the word out. And I think this is probably my biggest advice. That is my biggest piece of advice, because I've done plenty of coaching programs along the way too, and I put too much emphasis on that being my golden nugget key to success. Yes, you can learn strategies and you can learn all sorts of things, but ultimately you have to learn about yourself and understand that there's a longevity that comes with business now as well. Like, I wish I'd heard that from myself. Saying that, I don't know if I would have listened to it back then either.
You're on your own.
Yeah, because I'm in some ways quite a rebellious person, and I'm just like, if you tell me don't do it some way, I'll go and try and do it that way. But that's just my makeup and how I do it. And thankfully,
you have fears that you had to get over?
Oh, hell yeah. I still, as I said, I still did the face reading at markets. I remember doing my first video on Facebook, and I was, oh my God, I was so scared to do that. And I remember my way of getting over that was a bit like you're saying you prefer to talk to someone. I would pretend that my girlfriend was sitting across the table from me, and I was like, just have a conversation. Don't put so much emphasis on it. Everything's about practice. I mean, every time I do anything for the first time, there's fear there. I would say I've still got fear around launching. I don't like it. I've had that many good and bad experiences that I kind of procrastinate on that now, because I'm like, oh God. So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, like how to make it work for me. But I also take into consideration other things. Like, I had a Chinese astrology reading earlier this year. I've looked at my human design, my gene keys, really looking at a whole gamut of ways to understand yourself better, to find that, sweet spot to make things easier. Yeah.
I feel like I interrupted you and you were about to say something really profound, and I don't know if you remember it. You said, and thankfully, and then I interrupted you.
And thankfully. I'm sorry, I can't think of what it was. What was I talking about before that?
I don't know. We were talking about, I have been listening, but we've been talking about lots of great things. It was about what advice would you give to business owners and how...
Oh, I was going to say, thankfully, however it's happened, I've been supported the whole way through.
Oh, great.
Like, I've always had a roof over my head. I've always been fed. I haven't always had money in the bank, but somehow it's just all happened. And then that's when I look back and I go, God, if you just let go of the fear and enjoyed the process, you'd probably be a few steps ahead of where you are right now.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest lessons of fear, of like how debilitating it can be, and not being ashamed for the help that you do receive when you do need it as well, Yeah. It's such an interesting process, like to put yourself in the deep end, yet you do learn the most. I wouldn't advocate, and I don't advocate for people to do that. It's up to you if you want to, because it's not easy. Yeah. Holy cow. I've got no kids. I don't have a partner. It's just me. I did get some dogs that made me look after something. But, if I had a family, I think it would have been a whole lot different to what it is now, But, that's my journey. That's my thing. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, this has been great though. This has been so fun to connect to you and talk about psychosomatics in this way, because usually people don't have an understanding, so it's quite kind of a one-sided conversation. So this has been really nice.
Yeah. And I remember we connected like must be 7 or 8 years ago through a mutual friend and then through psychosomatic training. And we kept in touch for a little bit and then we haven't spoken for a long time. And then Helen reconnected us again. And it's just been so cool to see that you're still on that same journey and how it's evolved. And for just to hit it off and talk about this is great.
I know. I would say one thing I will finish with probably on that is when you know when you're here to do something. Like, I think that's the one thing, no matter what, the flame inside of me for psychosomatics and doing this has always been there. Like, it's like everything around it comes and goes and changes and goes all over the shop. And I don't know how one finds their own purpose. I don't have the answer to that. But when you do, you'll just know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling. And the challenges and the stresses, as you say, they're easier to overcome because you've got that bigger vision. And I definitely went through challenges of expressing more of the psychosomatic stuff, and it's evolved in my own way, but I definitely know that it's something that I want to be doing and I can talk about it all the time.
Exactly.
So how is it that you work with people if they want to reach out?
Yeah, so I work with people online. So I've got a face split analysis report that I do where you actually only just need to send in your photo and you get a written report back. Otherwise, I do online face readings, which are an hour consult, and I run online programs. So I've got my Chakra Philosophy Level 1 course, which basically goes into the emotional intelligence of the chakra system.
Is that something that people just work through on their own, or do they get access to you while they're doing that course?
They work through it on their own, so it's a self-study course. But I do have, at the moment, I've got a Facebook group for the students that are in there, so they can reach out and ask questions along the way. I do have some new ideas of what I want to do with that coming up, so they're not out just yet. But basically, anybody who becomes a student of that will always get all the upgrades and all the other goodies that I'll be churning out soon.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And how can people find you? So what's your website and your social media?
Yep, so my website is Seed to Soul, seed as in SEEDTOSOUL.com.au. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Melanie Midegs. So if you look up Melanie Midegs, you'll find me there.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, sure. So it's Midegs, Midegs. So just think of mid-eggs. A lot of people swap it around and put midges, but it's the middle of the egg.
I will put it in the podcast notes as well so people can reach out to you, and make sure you send some love towards Melanie for sharing her story with us today. And I think the Chakra Philosophy course is great for my listeners because, as I said, at the moment I just work and train health and wellness practitioners in the chakra space. So it would be great for anyone who's interested to learn this work more in depth to jump on that course.
Yeah.
It's open to anyone?
Yeah, it's open to anyone. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And I think from talking to you that you are also very practical and not too woo-woo or spiritual with how you communicate this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my core values and has been for a long time, ever since I started it, actually.
To not be woo-woo and spiritual.
Yeah, it's like try and keep this grounded because I wanted to get people in the corporate world to understand it, and that's why it's like I try and make it in their language as much as possible.
Yeah, it's cool. More people in business are talking about all these other things that can help support them.
Yeah.
As I said, I just reached out to an astrologer who lives in your town who I use because so much stuff is going on and I need some advice.
You can't discount it. It's just, I feel like it is kind of swaying that way because of what's going on in the world right now, and it's nice, Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Enjoy Bali Island life.
I will. Thanks, Jean.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Pain Story interview on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. Anything shared during this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. You can join my free Facebook group where I go live regularly to teach you about different conditions and the deeper underlying emotions at play.